Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Chat with Matt. I'm standing out here in the middle of the nursery. You can probably see some of the beautiful fall color behind me. It's late October, and I would say that this year has been one of the absolute best that I can remember in a while for fall color. I think it's just a combination of maybe some of the drought stress from earlier in the year combined with some really nice fall weather and some adequate rainfall here in October. I think all of that has been a really good recipe for really nice fall color. I think yesterday was probably the peak of fall color, maybe 2 days ago, but there's still some really nice fall color. So I thought I would talk about some of my favorite plants to add fall color to your yard. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna run through some different items. I'll talk about where they're best used, things like that. And we're gonna insert some photos in here so you can see what each of those trees or shrubs might look like. So one of my absolute favorites is a sort of native large shrub small tree called a serviceberry. The reason I say sort of native is that there's all different varieties of serviceberry, and some of them actually have been crossed with others, things like that, but most of them are North American natives. There's the Saskatoon serviceberry and the Shadblow serviceberry, Autumn Brilliance, or Apple serviceberry. So a lot of great varieties out there. Some are grown in a single stem, more tree form. Some of them are grown in a more traditional clump type form or multi-trunk form. Personally, I'm more partial to the multi-stem form, but it's really just personal preference. There's no good or bad, right or wrong on that. So serviceberry are going to get around 15 or 20 feet high. They have beautiful white flowers early in the spring. So they're a tree that will flower almost from top to bottom, just beautiful white little star-shaped flowers covering the plant. Those flowers are going to be followed by mature leaves, and then the flowers will be followed by a really nice fruit set. The fruit will ripen in June. When that fruit is ripe, the birds absolutely go crazy over it. It is edible for people. It's not anything that's going to be poisonous if you have a dog or other pets running around or kids or anything like that. But it is edible for people. It actually has a very nice taste to it, like a slightly less sweet blueberry is the best way I would describe it. It does have some little seeds in it, but I like to pick them off the tree, throw them on my cereal in the morning, things like that. Really, honestly, a very good tasting fruit. The tree is going to have a blue-green foliage throughout the summer months and then brilliant orangey red fall color. So really nice, native, hardy, pretty disease resistant, pretty insect resistant, kind of a low maintenance plant overall. So check out the serviceberry. Those would be a wonderful addition. They make a nice accent near the patio or deck, off the corner of the house. One of the other things that I like to use it for is in front of windows. Sometimes I see people plant dwarf trees, dwarf lilacs, dwarf crab apples, things like that. Those have very dense canopies, and so it blocks all the view and all of the light that might come into that window. Serviceberry, though, is, I won't say sparse, but it's certainly a sparser plant than those others that I just mentioned. So it still allows a lot of light to come through. You can sort of see through it a bit. I really like using it in front of like a dining room window, for instance, or maybe if you've got a tough view out the kitchen window, it might be nice because it'll still allow some light in, but it'll block the view a little bit. Plus the birds are going to be hanging out in there, so that's always fun too. So serviceberry is a really great fall coloring native. Another plant that I've been pushing, if you ever come into the garden center here and I help you find trees, if I'm doing a design for someone, or if I'm doing videos like this, I'm always pushing oak trees. Oaks are a really, really important tree to our local ecosystem here. There are more insects, more birds, more other pollinators and things like that that rely on the oak in some form or fashion for a part of its life cycle than any other species of tree. It's literally the top of the list. And they're absolutely beautiful trees. We have some gorgeous oaks in the forest preserve right across the street from the nursery here that are right now all different shades of burgundy. Some are yellows and oranges, some are browns. They're all beautiful. There's nothing more magnificent than a mixed oak forest in full color. I really love the fall color on them. And one of the things that I always hear is, I'm not interested in an oak because it's slow growing. And honestly, that really couldn't be further from the truth. Oaks get a really bad rap for being slow growing. The fact is that when you see those big old gnarly, 150, 200-year-old bur oaks or white oaks, it took a long time for them to get as big and gnarly as they are. Obviously, they have a ton of character to them, all that kind of stuff. Yes, it took a long time for them to get that big. But you can have a really reasonable or really nice-sized tree in a pretty reasonable amount of time. We have a beautiful swamp white oak planted here at the garden center. It was an ash replacement. We put it in the ground around '08, so it hasn't really been in the ground that long. I'd say it's about 30 feet tall already, and most of the oaks will average somewhere between 1 and 3 feet of growth per year. So certainly nothing to sneeze at in terms of growth rate, and some of them can even grow faster than that. So I really like the oaks a lot, and they are an important species for our area. So if you're looking to replace a tree or put a new tree in the yard, really might want to consider an oak tree. Another one that I really like is another native called an American hornbeam. It also goes by the name of musclewood or blue beech. All of those names are kind of interchangeable, but the American hornbeam has a beautiful kind of muscular texture to its bark. That's where it gets the name musclewood. Blue beech, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense to me. The foliage does look similar to that of a beech tree, so certainly that's where that comes from. The shape on the tree tends to be kind of upright, almost mushroom-ish shaped in time. It's good for full sun to mostly shade, and it's a wonderful understory tree. So if you have older, larger trees in your yard and you're looking for something to offer some interest and color, the American hornbeam would be a really good choice. They turn typically oranges and reds in the fall. There's a few different sort of flavors, cultivars, if you will, of the American hornbeam that we sell, like Fire Spire, which has a very upright, narrow shape. So if you're looking for something near the corner of the house, that would be a really good choice. There's a lovely variety called Native Flame, which just has a little brighter red fall color, but typically orangey to red fall color, beautiful texture, great understory tree, and nice size at only about 15 or 20 feet. And I would say moderate growth rate. So not anything that's going to get huge, at least not in a short amount of time. So really like that a lot. While we're talking about native species, I was just looking at my Blackhaw viburnum. Blackhaw viburnum is another native here. It's not quite sure if it's a tree or a shrub. I typically put it in the shrub category. But Blackhaw viburnum is a wonderful native plant. It's a really good substitute for burning bush. We're trying to avoid the use of burning bush because they can become invasive. The fruit, sometimes the birds will eat it. It'll end up out in the woods. We're trying to avoid the use of those. However, the Blackhaw viburnum has just as nice, if not nicer, fall color, beautiful glossy foliage, an edible fruit that the birds love, and also a very dense kind of canopy, if you will, that the birds love to nest in. The branches, you're going to have nice long branches on Blackhaw viburnum, but then there's these short little stubby branchlets down the side of the branch, and they almost act like thorns. They're not thorny, so it's easy to work around, but they're kind of short and stubby, and the birds really find a lot of protection in that plant. So it's a great screening plant. It's a great understory kind of filler. It's a great hedging plant. I've seen some used even in commercial plantings near buildings where they're trimming the heck out of it, and it still does awfully well. It stays very, very dense when trimmed, so especially if it gets enough sunlight. But the fall color is absolutely magnificent on it. So that'd be a really good choice for you if you're looking for some screening plants. I love to plant them together and kind of just make a little grove or a little thicket, if you will, kind of plant them so that you really can't tell where one plant ends and another begins. I really like the way that that looks. Another great fall coloring tree this year, especially in the garden center, but I would say pretty reliably in the nursery every year, it's our best fall coloring tree, and that's the black gum or black tupelo. So the botanical name is Nyssa, N-Y-S-S-A, but beautiful tree, about 30 feet tall, absolutely gorgeous fall color, usually starts off with some yellows and oranges, then goes to a nice kind of pinky red, ultimately to a bright red. The fall color is absolutely spectacular on them. I don't think we have a nicer fall coloring tree than the black tupelos. There's a wide variety of them. Again, you know, kind of some different selections. They're not really hybrids or anything, but just someone chose this tree because it tends to be more bright red. Someone chose this tree because it has variegated foliage. We have a really pretty one called Sherry's Cloud, which has green and white variegated leaves, but those are just selections. They're not really hybrids or anything like that. So great tree, beautiful understory, or even just standalone tree all by itself. They get about 30 feet tall, so it's an intermediate. It's not a full-size tree like an oak or a maple, but not small like some of the other ones that I've been mentioning. So that's a really, really good choice. Another one that I really like for both fall color as well as for its size is a shorter plant, a small shrub called Fothergilla. So Fothergilla, depending upon what variety you're using, is going to be anywhere from about 2.5 to about 5 feet high in our area. In some other parts of the country, they can get even a little bit larger than that, but Fothergilla has gorgeous fall color, but white bottle brush flowers in April, May, which is it's got a unique flower. It's kind of about this big around, so maybe about the diameter of a quarter, and kind of dome or cone shaped, but or gumdrop shaped maybe, and kind of fuzzy white. So really cool flowers, great fall color. They're just starting to color up right now, and they're going to be coloring all throughout, you know, the end of October here and well into November. So they're one of the later fall coloring varieties. So I really like those if you're looking for something a little bit on the smaller side. Another one that I was looking at in my yard that I've been really impressed with the last few years since I planted it is, again, another native here in Northern Illinois called American hazelnut. So the American hazelnut is a larger shrub. It'll get between 8 and about 12-ish feet high. I'd say 10 is kind of a good average size for it. Bright orange fall color. It can vary a little bit. Sometimes you'll get some yellow, sometimes you get a little red, but I would say it's a consistent orange fall color. It does have a little nut on it, the hazelnut, which is where we get Nutella from. So Nutella is made from hazelnuts. That is actually a native shrub. In fact, there's a little planting of it just right across the street over here in the forest preserve that I drive by all the time. It's just right over there. But I've planted some of those at the back of my yard for both the wildlife as well as just to provide a little bit of a privacy buffer. It does have a small flower. It's not anything that's very showy, but the fruit is beautiful. The fall color is beautiful. Just a really nice looking plant. A great substitute for if you have a problem with like buckthorn and honeysuckle, things like that in your yard. It's a great replacement for that. So is the Blackhaw viburnum that I was mentioning before. Those would both be good substitutes for some of those invasive understory shrubs that we're constantly trying to remove, or at least recommend removal of. Of course, you can't talk about fall color without mentioning maples. I hesitate to mention them because most people know them so well, and there's so many different varieties. Of course, many of them are beautiful. I love paperbark maple, not a native tree, but does very, very well here and does not reseed itself basically at all. Occasionally you'll find one seed, but it's not a very fertile plant. So you're not gonna find a lot of seedlings growing underneath a paperbark maple, maybe none. But beautiful fall color, gorgeous bark. I have an absolutely gorgeous Northwind Korean maple at home that I love. The fall color on that right now is bright kind of fuchsia pink, almost into some magenta colors. Pretty magnificent. We'll post some photos of that. Really like the fall color on that tree. And that is a tough, tough plant. So the Northwind Korean maple is actually a hybrid between a Japanese maple and a Korean maple. It came out of a breeding program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It was field tested out at the Bickelhaupt Arboretum out in Clinton, Iowa, which always tends to be about 4 to 6 degrees colder than we are during the winter. So if it's like 22 below here, it's about 26, 28 below out there. And it is performed very reliably out there. I've actually had this tree now for about 10 years. And so it's gone through several polar vortex winters. 2 years ago in the spring, we had a year where it was 60 and sunny in April, and then it was in the lower mid 20s and snowing, and then back in the 60s and back in the 20s. And, this kind of, who knows whether it's winter or spring, which can be very difficult on plants. And the Northwind maple just breezed right through that as if it wasn't even a thing. And then I'm going to throw one other one at you that I think is an honorable mention kind of thing. And that's the bald cypress. Bald cypress is a deciduous conifer, so it's a cone-bearing plant, like a pine or a spruce, but it's deciduous, like an oak or a maple. It's going to drop its leaves in the fall. But right now, they're a beautiful kind of rusty pink color. So it has great fall color, shaggy bark, which is very attractive. It has the ability to soak up incredibly large amounts of water. So it's an excellent tree if you back up to a creek, back up to a retention pond, have a low swale in your yard where water tends to sit or pool. If you've got that mushy spot that you can rarely mow because the lawnmower always gets bogged down going through there, that'd be a really good choice for you, is the bald cypress. They can get rather large. I always caution people, if you look up bald cypress, say online, you're going to see pictures of bald cypress down in the Louisiana swamps and things like that. That is not at all what they look like in the local landscape. They're a great tree. They are native to Illinois, although we don't have too many native ones up here in northern Illinois, more native in the southern part of the state. But beautiful tree, very, very hardy, keeps an upright sort of pyramidal or gumdrop shape to it, with a fine light green needle-like foliage that will fall off in the fall. So beautiful plant. So I do like to mention that one because I think it has great fall color, even though it's not the like brilliant red or pinks that we kind of think about for fall color. I do like it for fall color. Lastly, I want to throw one other shrub at you. It's another native. It is called spicebush. It's a great plant for butterflies. There's specifically, there is a butterfly called a spicebush swallowtail that needs the spicebush for its life cycle. But the fall color is a beautiful lemon yellow. Ours at home are absolutely gorgeous this year. Beautiful yellow fall color, very nice yellow flowers in the springtime, followed by a small reddish fruit in the late summertime. You do need both a male and a female. It's one of the few plants in the trade that none of the growers really sex them. They don't identify what's what. So you generally have to plant a few of them if you want to get fruit, and that's really just kind of chance. Theoretically, you could have two. You could have just one male and one female, but generally I tell people plant a few of them if you want the fruit. Otherwise, the fall color and the flowers are just fantastic all by themselves, even with no fruit. So both the males and females flower. Both of them have beautiful fall color. So you're not really risking anything by not knowing what the sex of that particular plant is. But it's a great shrub. Maybe even small tree. It gets about 12, maybe even 15 feet high. I have some at home in almost complete shade doing very, very well, which is kind of nice. They would prefer a little more sun, so part sun or dappled light is wonderful for them, but beautiful plant, and they basically look good from spring all the way through fall, so that's a really nice one too. Wanted to throw just a couple of things at you in terms of fall cleanup and fall maintenance. I know I did a talk a couple weeks ago about that, but I thought I'd throw a couple other things at you. Now is the time for you to get rid of any diseased foliage that you might have. So if you had let's say, a black spot on your roses or apple scab on a crabapple tree, things like that. If you know you had some of those foliar leaf diseases, it's really best to try to rake up and clean out those leaves as best as you can. Most of those diseases, the fungal spores will overwinter on the fallen leaves and then will emerge in the spring. They kind of explode and shoot back up onto the tree in the springtime when the weather is right for that particular disease. So the removal of that foliage is going to help prevent that disease next year. Otherwise, I always tell people, leave your leaves. You know, I don't know where that came from in terms of we've got to rake up all of our leaves and we have to get rid of everything that falls in our yard. And then we put it in lawn bags and give it away. And then in the spring, we buy compost to put in our garden. All of those leaves would make wonderful compost. So if you have a compost pile, of course, you know what you're doing already. You can compost those leaves. If you don't, consider running the lawnmower over the leaves a few times and throwing them in a perennial bed. Otherwise, I like to just leave the leaves whole, blow them into the beds, into some of my little natural areas. Some of the areas are just typical landscape beds, and the leaves will bed down in there, and insects and other critters will use that for habitat. And so I like to leave that as often as possible, or as best as you can. I know it's not for everybody, but it's a really good practice to leave your leaves. So I hope that that maybe inspires you a little bit to be lazy and not rake up all of your leaves. The other thing is that for perennials, in terms of cutting them down, again, especially our native perennials, we want to leave those stems and the foliage and seed heads and all of that kind of stuff up all winter for birds and insects to use. So your non-native perennials and non-native shrubs probably aren't a big deal if you want to trim those back at this time of year. Otherwise, we recommend waiting until spring for trimming those particular plants down, or you do it, kind of late winter or something like that, as insects are starting to wake up when the weather is starting to get, consistently over about 45 degrees. Some of those insects are starting to wake up that may have been hibernating or overwintering in your garden beds. So, of course, a landscape offers little value if it doesn't support a large amount of biodiversity. So that's one of our goals here, is to encourage you to add different plants into your yard that are going to add to the ecosystem, add benefits to our local landscape. Of course, most of the plants are beautiful, but not all of them can support wildlife in our area. So that's one thing that I like to encourage people to do. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that you have learned a little something. Hope that we've inspired you to maybe find some new fall coloring plants for your yard the next time you're ready for something. As always, if there's anything that we can help you with, come see us at Wasco Nursery or check us out online at www.wasconursery.com. Thanks for watching.
What are you doing right now, Matt?
I heard a bird that I didn't know what it was, so I'm trying to find out if my phone is going to tell me using the Merlin Bird ID app. But now the bird isn't making its noise.